agents. I'm quoting Johnson now. We are beings whose identities emerge and develop in an ongoing process of interactions with our physical, interpersonal, and cultural environments. To function successfully within these changing environments, our reason must be expansive, exploratory, and flexible. The locus of our moral moral understanding is thus our imaginative rationality, a human rather than universal reason that allows us to envision and to test out in imagination various possible solutions to morally problematic situations. By giving us alternative perspectives, it also thereby gives us means of criticizing and evaluating those projected courses of action and the values they presuppose. End of quote. I believe that the work of Mark Johnson needs to become mandatory reading for multiple disciplines in academia. I believe that Johnson bridges the rift between mind and body, reason and emotion, between beliefs and moral tenets, between personal perspectives on morality and universal one, between aesthetic valuing as an instrument for individual growth and development, and the study of art as a canon. And of course, feminist writers have done a lot of that and have entrenched these values in the literature. And there are too many to enumerate here, but they meet with Johnson's perspective. What educators intuitively know and practice and came to understand through paradigm shifts in academia, the business world has started barely scrambling with today. Let me just say at the outset that I believe that the social science of business leaves much to be desired. It has only lately begun to adopt, from the discipline of psychology, for example, certain select notions about emotions, motivation, and leadership. They use those, and I'm being a cynic on this, of course, merely to soften the brutality of business practices in our world, to deflect the harsh and oppressive practices of employing thousands of workers from developing countries for minimal and in certain cases almost no pay by international standards, whether in construction or in the garment industry or elsewhere. Condescending attempts to add life to the sterile and cold, sanitized offices of big, calculating, voracious companies. I am extremely skeptical of the business world and its scandalous non-adherence to a moral order or moral codes of behavior, not least of which is that it has been ripping off teachers for centuries, since it has never put a monetary value on educators' work, which is equitable to the efforts invested and services rendered. Of course, when confronted with that, business adduces the nature of the teaching profession, which has historically been described as noble, sublime, altruistic, to the effect that this calling is difficult to evaluate materially. What a ripoff. Let us begin by bridging the gap between millions upon millions of dollars in illegal profit that the world of business and its CEOs stole from ordinary people's pensions in the recent unraveling of multiple crises of the subprime investments and the banking world. Let's admit it, business and politics have failed the young generations completely. We have created monsters out of our politics, religions and sects, and our technological advancements. The younger generations are looking at the complete dehumanization of political systems, of religions, and of human sexuality in pornography, of course. Greed is the god of the infidels who are raking in the fruits of labor of decent people. To add insult to injury, the practices of business have rendered people unable to deal with more than survival at the minimum level. No time to do anything besides earning one's daily bread, if one is lucky enough to have a job, that is. They have also succeeded in alienating us from our brothers and sisters in other cultures. In our polemical tug-of-war between the philosophical notions of the universal and the particular, between mine and yours, ours and theirs, we have not succeeded in choreographing that dance that will allow us to keep our individuality as different civilizations. In the words of the Lebanese-French eminent writer Amin Maalouf, in his book, In the Name of Identity, Violence and the Need to Belong, this is what he says. At the same time as we fight for the universality of values, it is imperative that we fight against the impoverishment of standardization, against hegemony, whether ideological, political, economic, or operating in the media, against foolish conformism, against everything that stifles the full variety of linguistic, artistic, and intellectual expression, against everything that makes for a monotonous and puerile world. A battle in defense of certain practices and cultural traditions, but one that is clear-sighted, rigorous, discriminating, not oversensitive, not unduly timorous, always open to the future, end of quote. I think that the work of Karen Armstrong, who spent 7 years as a Roman Catholic nun before she left the order in '69, in her books A History of God, The Battle for God, Islam, A Short History, and Buddha, and last but not least, Holy War, the Crusades and their impact on today's world, is an example of the kind of educator who can bring peoples together. Second pedagogic creed, I believe that teachers need to be vocal. They need to make their voices heard loudly, and that they are uniquely endowed to lead society when it articulates the injustices hurled on its members, not least of whom are children, women, the poor, the disenfranchised, and the disempowered. In spite of all the invidious declarations and new laws created in the West to curb the dissenting people's voices in demonstrations in New York and in London, alas, the last bastion of democracy in the world has been demolished. It doesn't surprise us when other nations do it, but for that to happen in England and the United States of America, you know, if they put their minds to it together, I think educators can intelligently and in subtle ways usurp the power from those who abuse it. I can hear the curmudgeons say with the gadfly, come on, you are an idealist. What is this? The next thing we are going to hear you say is, educators of the world, unite. Make no mistake, I'm not an idealist. I am an existentialist at heart. Who can dispute the only two truths we know, for sure? We are born and we die. However, the existentialist tragic awareness of life's absurdity does not necessarily lead to nihilism. It takes real courage to create the path of one's own life, as you all know, and to live it to the fullest, while being aware of and sensitive to Sartre's diktat that our freedom ceases to exist when we trespass on the freedom of others. Hence the difference between a teacher and a cynic. The cynic mocks serious human effort to confront the absurdity of the world we live in. The teacher, on the other hand, and from my own perspective, is represented by Joseph Campbell's hero with 1,000 faces, who sees beyond the blind spot of humanity and obtains the boon, the hero who leads society to a better place. If, as Albert Camus says in The Myth of Sisyphus, the absurd is born out of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world, then educators, of whom we are but a microcosmic example, are heroically attempting to redress the silence by helping students and learners shape their lives and facilitating the enrichment of experience against the rebirth of the world in its prolixity. Hence, dealing with paradox continually. You all know it. An arduous undertaking. Thus, it would benefit society to employ educators as consultants in every single sector of government. And they need to also partake in creating new laws that defend further the interests of the disenfranchised, the weak, the poor, and the oppressed, who now constitute the majority of humanity, actually.